Sometimes people think, oh, like affirmations are corny, or I don't believe in that because I feel like I'm lying to myself. But you're just directing yourself in the new person that you want to be, right? In these characteristics. And that's going to take, again, that repetition. Welcome to the Delulu Magic Podcast, where we rewire our mindset and live the most magical version of our lives. I'm Paola.
And I'm Gabby, and today we wanted to talk to you guys about something we came up with this past week, which is the topic of self-mastery. And as we discussed that, we thought we would just call it Self-Mastery March because, as we all know, we could never really finish learning about ourselves. But the purpose of our podcast is discussing these things, especially for us as we develop this brand. Beginning with the first one, which we both agreed on, was our inner voices.
Yes. So self-talk, of course, is so important. And I think most of us are doing self-talk every single day, except it's negative self-talk, right? We are not being intentional about the things we're telling ourselves. And I think one of the biggest things that I realized probably a couple years ago with talking about self-talk is that just because your brain has a thought, so everything your brain says is not actually true, right? It is not an actual fact. Usually it's old patterns, old programming, old childhood wounds that you may not know you have. And so when your brain tells you something, for example, like with this podcast, like you probably don't have the time for that. You don't have the capacity or the capability or the skill set, to do this thing. It's really speaking out of fear. And our brains are here to keep us protected, right? It's like survival mode. So it wants to protect us. And it prioritizes comfort and basically prioritizes certainty over keeping you happy. And so sometimes it keeps you really stuck, and it will tell you these things that are absolutely not true. So that's one of the biggest things I think we have to realize when it comes to self-talk in order to be able to say, okay, I can actually change what I think about, right?
Yes, definitely, definitely, and just that keyword, what you said, it's everything. Everything you're in there is not real.
Yeah.
And yes, we are going to eventually tell you that your thoughts become your reality, but the specific one today that we're going to be talking about, that a critical, we all do it right away, feeling like you're not smart. What you said about the podcast, not smart enough. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this.
How did you basically start, or when did you start seeing the importance of self-talk and really like start practicing, I guess, positive self-talk?
The positive self-talk for me came probably through therapy, right? Hearing my therapist a few years ago telling me about how important that was, and that I needed to start, not going back to my beliefs or whatever I thought was what all I knew was, these thoughts, which I alluded to other people putting them in there. I didn't realize they were my own, even though I was saying them to myself and eternally just everyday life. And doing the positive self-talk has come, I would recognize it's come maybe this year, right now, taking on this project together, right? I have had to sit and look at things that I am terrified of, or I can call it your word, vulnerable about, and be like, okay, how do I do this? Because my brain automatically wants to go into you don't know what you're doing. You don't, what are you doing? Like, why are you even going that way? Like, you need to come back to what we know, like, which is safety,
Like stay in your lane, kind
stay
of.
in my lane, and comfort, right?
Yeah.
So I thought of an example I'm going to use for this week, that we've got Delulu, but we're also working on some other things, and I love to talk, but I'm so uncomfortable with like visual stuff of myself, like seeing myself in pictures or things like that. I'm quick to like see something and I'm like, oh, that does not look good. That is not good enough. It's not perfect. wire in my brain right away. My thoughts. It starts. This quick little thing, and then
Spiraling.
if I get busy, I'm able to distract myself away from it. But then it comes back later, and it's like ruminating because I just figured this out probably 30 minutes ago. That I'm like, when I do that negative self talk, then whatever the situation is, I won't do it. I'll avoid it,
Yeah.
procrastinate it. I'll put it away, file it for later, and then when I go back to it, I'm still like, ugh, inside, telling myself like, um, so that is my biggest one. Is just because I don't know if I associate negative with if I with vulnerable, like I hearing myself. So I'm not sure. I'm still working on it.
Yeah.
It just
And I think that's part
yeah.
of like what I hear you saying is the self-acceptance, right?
Yes.
Being able to look at a photo of
Yeah.
ourselves. And I think we're just so, we get used to, right? Criticizing, we get used to comparing, especially right now with social media and saying like, oh, I'm not perfect in this photo, or I don't like the way I'm smiling or standing, or, that kind of thing. So I definitely feel you on that.
Oh, what am I gonna write? I'm not even I don't even know what this all means. How to even do it, editing, all those things. So that has been just it happens so quickly, not realizing it, right? It's just how our brain right away will go to tell me that. Even though the rest of the day I've been able to find I can, kind of correct when I start those thoughts come in, like about other stuff. I feel more secure in myself, but it's still very much there.
And I think, with just anything new, right? And I think, again, our brain wants to keep us so in the certainty. It doesn't like any uncertainty. And so it tries to tell us, like you were saying, just don't do that, stay in your lane,
Yes,
kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
So what are some of the things then that you do to help with that?
Oh, so like this was the specific one about being on, I guess, social media and adding things to Delulu. A lot of it has been, I love to talk to a friend. You and I, a lot of venting. My husband's really good about that, listening to me. Just that communicating and being, I think, reassured, which I know that we most of the time say, you don't need it, but that does help me if I don't know to help to process it or to see myself through your eyes or through their eyes, right? So then I'm kind of like, okay, maybe that thought I had is not really as big a deal or as bad as I'm making it. It's not. Most of the time,
It's not even. It's not even
it's
true.
not even true, right? And that's a big one for me. So I think that if people feel comfortable, like telling, like again, being vulnerable, be comfortable with your loved ones, your friends. I mean, if you have anybody that you can kind of like say the things you feel really like have those thoughts about, and most, will tell you, hey, no, that's not. I don't think you're gonna find people that are gonna be like, yeah, that you're right. You are, not enough. And then another one I added was like sitting down and on my notes. I do a lot of my notes on the phone because I would love to write a lot more than I do, but on my notes kind of write it out. And I think I listened to a couple of audiobooks and then podcasts about that, just writing it out, and then processing, like, why do I have those thoughts? Why do I believe that? And what you said is like, it's not true. Like my brain, it wasn't true. Like whatever I wanted to tell, what I had heard, and then I wanted to send to my body that was true. But once I go through these two things, I definitely see that, they're able to kind of shut down or just turn off.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need you.
Absolutely. I think I feel that too. And I know we were talking about this, and I know for me, being really, again, intentional. It's almost like being aware and seeing, okay, what are my thoughts? What, and for me, it also came out like during therapy where she was like, you're very hard on yourself, right? You expect perfection. You expect just to be on all the time. And I didn't realize how critical I had become of myself. But the more practice and the more I do it and the more intentional I am at like being aware and shifting that thought consistently, right? And it's practice. It is work, right? But do you want to live a happier life? Do you want to live a better life, right?
Yes.
Do you want to attract more things? So I was absolutely willing to put in the work. And what I noticed is that now that voice that used to be so loud and so dominating is now a lot quieter. She doesn't always come out. So I have a name. I think we've talked about this from my brain. Her name is Becky. And, and sometimes Becky is the critic, and sometimes she's a protector, and sometimes she's, it's just like she's got a lot of different roles. She's the workaholic, right? The perfectionist. And sometimes Becky will come out with that really critical voice, and now I have like a dialogue. Instead of being so hard on myself for criticizing myself or hard on Becky, I'm like, hey, it's okay. People make mistakes. Like, it's okay that we did that. And having that dialogue, almost like separating myself from me, right? Again, thinking, hey, these are this is not real.
Yes.
And having a conversation. And when that doesn't work, I look at those thoughts and think, if it was my little self or like my kids thinking this, would that be okay? Would I say these things still? Or you, right? I absolutely would not. We talk so horribly to ourselves sometimes, right? And when you say these things out loud, then you're like, oh my God, why? I wouldn't put this out for anyone else. Why would we say that to ourselves?
Yeah, because I think again we come with it, without realizing it. I think we somehow started to believe what the outside wanted us to believe, and then we were already kind of innately had these thoughts that oh, it must be true because the world thinks it, so I am automatically gonna associate more with that and keep it in there for just in case you want to feel a little too confident.
Yeah.
So let me know, like, how do you feel that for you? Because I know I've witnessed you being able to do that, but do you have like when a time that it kind of clicked for you as well that this was happening, like that you were more aware of when you were able to spot on that you were like, oh,
Yeah,
identifying it for yourself?
I think a really big, when I was like, wow, this is crazy. And I also now, it gave me a lot more compassion for myself, and that I was overly critical was, I was definitely an adult, probably late 20s, early 30s. And I saw my dad, something happened. He made a mistake, or according to him, or he was late somewhere, something. And I remember hearing him, and he was just like, I'm so stupid. I'm so like verbally, like, I'm so stupid. I can't do anything right. Like, just going in on himself. And it was really sad to see. It's sad to see anybody speak to themselves that way. And I've gone in on myself, but I don't think I've ever actually like said it verbally. Like, I think it, but I don't say it verbally. So to hear him and see the emotion that he had with that, first, I had to talk to him and be like, hey, don't talk to yourself like that. You're not stupid. Anybody can make a mistake. So I felt like I was talking to like the little him,
Yes.
right? Because he must have like regressed, and it was like a triggering moment, whatever that was. But also it gave me a lot of compassion for myself, because I thought, as well-intentioned as our parents are, right? They have their own trauma and their own things that they deal with by the way that they were raised. And I must have probably as a kid, and I don't remember, but if he's doing this now, how many times did I see that pattern repeating itself, right? And if you see your parents doing that, subconsciously, you're probably going to repeat the same patterns. And he wasn't just critical of himself. I think he didn't try to be critical of me, but things like, oh, you could do this better. Or why did you do it that way? That little or you feel that I didn't do it the right way. I didn't do it the way I was supposed to, right? And it gives you a lot of negative feelings as a child. And then you grow up with that, and then that same little repetitive voice, why didn't you do it that way? Or why did you do this exactly? And it becomes, again, it's just like, it is a habit. It is something that you've done so many times, and now you have programmed yourself to talk to yourself in this way. And since it's a habit, we can change that. Now it is a pattern, and that's like been wired in you for a very long time. So can it be done overnight? No, you're gonna have to be consistent in it. But I think that's the thing, being consistent. So to me, that was like the very first time I realized, wow, like I understand now why sometimes my self-talk is like so critical.
Yes, that's amazing that you were able to like catch it that early on, because I think most of us go through life and we're just kind of assuming, however we are, whatever thoughts we have, they're our own. And yes, they are our own, obviously, but there's a lot of backstory to everything. So you become who you are by all of that, right?
Yeah.
You add all those things together.
Yep.
So do you feel once you started to see that, and you had that self-compassion, were you able to, what were you able to implement back then that you feel like, are you still doing now, or have you been able to adapt as you continue
I think for me, the
going
biggest thing,
into that?
and we've talked about
Yeah.
being the observer, taking ourselves out of it, I think is like the biggest thing for me. Like, and the thing that the three things that I do is like being aware. So for people out there, being aware and maybe taking a couple days where you're just like, I'm going to notice how I speak to myself throughout the day. I'm going to notice how I speak to myself when I pass by the mirror, when I'm trying something new, when I think of a bold idea, right? When I'm going to go interact with someone, what am I thinking? And so being aware and observing those thoughts. And then the next phase would be, I think, that I started doing was interrupting that thought. And I got this like really from Joe Dispenza. When I read that book,
Yeah. Amazing.
they're breaking the habit
Breaking-
of, being yourself. We'll put it in the comments. It is amazing. But being aware of the thought and then interrupting it. And what I say is I say, shift, like, okay, shift. Can you change this thought? And I'll try to then replace it with a thought that I want to have. And I know that sometimes people think, oh, like affirmations are corny, or I don't believe in that because I feel like I'm lying to myself. But you're just directing yourself in the new person that you want to be, right? In these characteristics. And that's going to take, again, that repetition. So I think being aware, interrupting that thought, and then by shifting and then replacing it with a really good thought.
With a new,
Yeah, it was basically,
well,
I
you-
think,
you
for me, the
reset,
thing
yeah.
that worked consistently.
And that is incredible, because I mean, everything, if you read, again, read, listen to, I mean, watch, it's really so important about doing that, where we're able to do, if we become the observer, if we, that's so important to stop and, think of that. Like, how often do we all do that? I
No,
don't. We
we're
just
just
go
drifting
get
through
up
life,
and,
like-
and then it's like, oh, and then why do I feel bad? Why am I having these thoughts? Because I didn't stop and look at what's happening right now, right? Or why am I having those thoughts? Why are they even coming in there?
Yeah.
You know?
Do you think a lot of these like negative self-talk
Yeah.
that we have comes from like our childhood?
I think from childhood, and I really believe that. I love that you gave that example about how you heard your dad and that. And I think what we see, obviously, we live, people tell us, just like for all humans, you're going to hear things, but actions really show us, right? And seeing that, and seeing, actually verbalizing your dad and all that, how it just stays in our brain. And so we innately are going to believe, okay, that's how it's supposed to be, and I feel, for me, a big one is that from childhood, I didn't realize I had those things. Like, I thought it just my stuff. I didn't think, anything I reacted to or thought of was my own. I didn't know it was because I've been exposed to that, and then it just became part of who I am, part of my brain. A big one for me right now, again, has been, it's funny, between not funny, guys, but being diagnosed with ADHD at 44 years old, and it's like I've had these things, nobody ever paid attention. Then my children were diagnosed, and that by default I was like, okay, maybe I need to get checked out. But just with that diagnosis alone led to me having a lot of, okay, well, there's parts of me that I should pay attention more to what they are. And the example is, right, the talking a lot, things like that, or that oversharing, all the stuff. It's just the reaction. You have a million thoughts are going in there. Some are really
I'm gonna
good.
get them all out.
Some are really, whatever they need to be, and some can be really intrusive and bad. And a big one for me used to be feedback, right? I did not use that word very in a positive manner. I thought everything, if somebody said anything, I felt judged or criticized, and then right away my brain would go into, oh, that means I'm not even going to do anything new. I'm not, because this person said this, and that is real. And my brain would say, you heard what they said. It said no, so you don't do it. And having this project, now I've been able to kind of rewire my brain where I can listen, and I'm like, no, I'm accepting of that now, and I take it as constructive. And I'm like, okay, now you told me that, and I can be okay with it. And then my brain won't do that negative talk where it's like, quit, don't do that. You know, the no. Oh my God, that's a big one. So that's really helped with that inner talk and changing from like that childhood or like a young adulthood talk. Um, so I think that's really, really positive. Having the positive talk now that's helped me
Yeah.
that to change that pattern. I'm able to break it and not be offended.
Yeah. No, I know that's hard. Yeah. Taking
So
feedback.
yeah. Do you feel like you're able to have positive things now that because they are positive things? I'm saying whenever people were telling me feedback, it wasn't bad, but I took it before as bad.
Yeah.
So you have things
I
that
do. Yeah,
yeah
I think I could take it a lot easier, like, the
yes
feedback. And I was always in sales, so I think I would take that, I
yes
would
you
always
were
like, okay,
receptive
like I
yeah
didn't feel it as, really it was more the self-criticism, right, for me.
yeah
And the, oh, let's say, like, especially I think it started really coming out, like, with when I had kids, because I was, like, criticizing myself all the time. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so I'm like, am I doing this right? I should have done it this way. I should. And then you hear other people's, right, the feedback or opinions, and you're like, God, I'm just like, I don't know exactly what I'm doing. So you feel a little bit lost, and overly critical. And I just think for words are so important. The words we tell ourselves, right? Like our words can really define our destiny. It is like attracts like. So if you are putting shit out, you're going to get shit back. If you are telling yourself you are stupid, I'm not capable, I don't know how to do this, I feel like the universe, right, because it brings you,
The
it
energy.
mirrors what you're thinking and what you're saying, whether it is about yourself or about your situations and the experiences that you're living, right? And you can get really stuck in this loop and and you're, again, attracting all these negative things that you say you don't want, but because you're speaking in that way, that's all you're going to keep getting back. And I think that's why we started with self-talk for this self-mastery march, because if you can't figure this part out, it's going to be very hard to, I think, transform your life, honestly.
yeah it is. It definitely is. You're 100% right on that. Like whatever our thoughts are, it's what your life becomes. And that those inner thoughts, if you're not aware of how many of them are in there that are not good for you, and then you're just going to continue on that loop of why is it like this? Why is my life that way? Why do I feel like this? Why do I have anxiety is a big one for me. Like, oh, that's a quick example I can give. I could spiral real fast into anxiety because, like watching something and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's going to happen. That's 100%. No, it's not going to happen. It's just you thought because you watched it and your brain right away wanted to tell you that's reality. So, I think I'm going to probably say, most of us don't realize that, like 48% of our days are like our repeated patterns, right? Just every single day. Just that's how we're going to live forever and ever. And if we can start replacing them, with your whatever what you're recommending, just those things little by little will, eventually you will have exactly what you need in your brain. It doesn't mean you will never have bad thought, intrusive thoughts, I like to call them, or things that are not helping you or become a better you or healing. You are able to function in a way where life is going to end up going your way and rewarding you.
Yeah.
If you are able to do that, because it all starts inside in our brain, and our brain is the most important part of how all of our mental health.
Absolutely.
So
and that self-talk with
yeah.
that self-acceptance, I think it's like it's
Yes.
all so intertwined.
Yes,
right?
it is.
Because we
It's
talk negatively to ourselves, then how much love and acceptance and worthiness can we 100% feel? Like, I've talked to people, they're like, no, I absolutely have a lot of self-love, but they're so critical of themselves. Like, I don't feel like that necessarily like matches up.
Yeah.
Right. To really, and sometimes you have to go deep and like just really be honest with yourself.
yes, I super important, and I observe, like your word said, like learn to observe. I think that's a big one that I would recommend for people to start doing. Just observe. That's easy to do. Catch yourself, make some notes, and why am I thinking that? Actually, like in some silence, maybe, and do a little bit of reflecting. Where is that coming from? Because there's usually a backstory, and maybe you could start repairing it slowly,
Yes. Yeah.
with your own rewording, new patterns, all that stuff. So it will show you when you sit and observe, it will show you.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. It's
you'll
like
have
it reveals itself.
yes,
And
yeah,
it's really
yeah,
interesting. And if you can do it with no judgment,
yes.
right? Just
Oh
like
yeah,
don't judge
that's a big one.
when you're observing, don't judge it.
Yeah.
I recently heard something which I thought was really interesting. It was about Jay Shetty, and he had these women come to a room, and they were all going to write down. They were supposed to write down all the things that they told themselves that was negative, all the negative self-talk, right? And so they sat down, which I think is a great exercise, honestly, for someone to do. Put on a timer. Like, I know that sometimes it's hard to do these things, like to really like go in and reflect, because who really wants to do that? That's like dark and scary sometimes. But put on a 10-minute timer and write out all the negative things that you tell yourself, just like they did. But then what I found really interesting was that, so they wrote everything out, and then he had their younger sisters in a separate room, and he had them go in there, and he was like, I want you to read everything that you wrote out to them. Not Don't tell them that you wrote it thinking about yourself, but I want you to tell them all these things and tell it like you're telling it to them. And they were like, absolutely not. I'm not going to say this to my younger sister. But again, we speak to ourselves like insanely, things that we would never tell anyone else, and yet we're feeding our bodies that, right? And it's shown, right, in neuroscience that our cells are picking up on all that. They are
Every single thing.
Yeah, just like when they have those experiments about the plants. You talk to one really nice, you talk to another one. I think it's a doctor named Dr. Emoto.
Yeah.
And he did this experiment on water molecules, right? And so he basically took the water, spoke to it in a really nice way, or I love you, I'm so grateful for you, and then took other water and was like, you are gross, you are awful, you are ugly, I despise you. And then they flash froze it. And then they basically looked at how those formations formed. And the ones that were spoken to in a really beautiful way were like, they looked so beautiful, like snowflakes, almost like crystalline, like perfect structures. Whereas the other ones look so chaotic.
Oh.
And so everything is energy, what we're putting out. So the words, again, that we tell ourselves are the most important.
Yeah. The most
And,
critical.
I just think that if we can speak to ourselves better and to our loved ones better, I think this whole world would just like the humanity would just, the vibration would be raised.
Yeah. And love would end up showing up because, we would end up having kindness and empathy for each other.
Yeah. And then we would do so much more.
Yes.
We would do so much more because we know like how capable we are. I mean, we're of source, we're of God. So we have so much that we can do, and we limit ourselves. And I think, that's super.
Starting inside.
Yeah.
So,
We put ourselves in our own cage, which I know we've talked about that, before.
So it's time to come out.
It's time
and
to
do
come
the
out.
work.
Yes.
So don't remember, nothing changes unless you do.
So stay Delulu and make it happen.
We'll see you next time.